The Outer Side is proudly supported by Tie Gear. Head to www.tiegear.com to explore the wide range of high-quality camping essentials, including guy ropes, screw-in tent pegs, tie-downs, and heaps more. Tie Gear. Adventure secured. Dog and Gun Coffee. Check out www.dogandguncoffee.com to grab yourself some bloody good coffee ready for adventure. G'day and welcome to The Outer Side. I'm Tony, and in this episode, I'm joined by David Swarbrick, the owner of Blue Flame Automotive. Dave, welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks, mate. Glad to be here.
I'm glad that we've got this here because it's we'll talk about that in due course. But first, before we get started, I'm going to start with the Fast Five. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you're going to answer with the first thing that comes to mind. What is your dream car?
There's a few. My dream car would be an F450.
Sick.
Yep.
What is your favourite place in Australia?
That would be, I reckon, Lake Mackenzie's, Fraser Island.
Yeah, sick. It's like paradise, eh?
Oh, man, yeah.
Is it a Palmer or a Palmee?
Palmer.
Oh, are you from Victoria?
No, I was actually born in WA, so.
That explains a lot. What is your favourite band or music artist?
Rise Against.
Rise Against.
Yeah.
What is that, metal?
It's kind of like, mixed metal, it kills me not to know this, but I've...
Okay. And what would you eat for your last meal?
Oh, that'd be a medium rare eye fillet with potatoes and beans. Can't go wrong.
Solid answer. Yeah. I appreciate that. All right, mate. So you own Blue Flame Automotive.
Yep.
You got a couple of shops.
We do, yep.
So one in Sydney, one on the Central Coast.
Yep, that's it.
And I mean, to describe that business, 4-wheel drive specialists, right?
Yes, I would say 95% of all the work we do is 4-wheel drives. Yeah.
So how did that business come about? Like, have you always been into 4-wheel drives? Did you do like an apprenticeship as a mechanic, or what was the sort of journey to get to where you are now?
It's a long journey. I could go on for a long time, obviously, but my kind of background with 4-wheel driving started very young. Like I travelled from WA, like I was mentioned, I was born in Perth, and we travelled with my mother across WA, right across Australia, ended up in far north Queensland, but we did all this in a Nissan Pulsar. Yes. So we actually did the Gibb River Road in a Nissan Pulsar and punched the fuel tank and everything. So it was kind of like the lack of not having a 4-wheel drive and growing up and doing all this stuff without a 4-wheel drive. And later on, when we moved to Queensland eventually, we got an old GQ short-wheelbase Patrol, and that was, back when I was probably 11 or 12, and the passion kind of came from there in the early days, so yeah.
That's so good. And you are, I can't remember the exact numbers, but you are one of many of my guests on this show who had a GQ Patrol in their family as a youngster.
Yeah, it must be a thing.
Every single one of those people has still got a GQ Patrol.
You got to have one, you can't be without it. Yeah, even as old as you are, you got to have a GQ Patrol somewhere.
Yeah, it's a requirement to own a GQ. That's fantastic. And that's so cool when I hear those stories like, we drove the Gibb in a Pulsar.
Yep, no word of a lie. No one believes me either, but I can get my mother up here and she'll prove it. But we did it, and we were in the last stretch, I think it was near Wyndham, and it would have been about 20 Ks, and it was just a flat dirt road. We actually punched the fuel tank, so we got towed into town. The police actually helped us. We got it into town, and we fixed up the fuel tank, and off we went again. But yeah, Gibb River in a Pulsar.
So good, and something that we talk about a lot is not needing like all of the gear to go touring. Now, I don't know if you'd recommend doing it in a Pulsar, but it's amazing how far we've come in terms of
it's definitely changed massively since the 90s, I think,
what people think they need to go travelling, whereas you look at I love looking at the old historic photos of the Cape, and it's like XY GT Falcons, like
crazy
going up the telly.
Yeah.
I reckon that we've lost a little bit of that.
We have. I swear the tracks have gotten a lot harder too in the last 15 years. It's like that, yeah.
Absolutely, and I'm sure it's a lot more comfortable in a 4-wheel drive than an XY, but
I reckon so. Cool. Yeah, for sure. But the side of the business, I guess, when I started, not many people know this, the full story. I guess I'll try to explain as quick as I can.
But mate, you got an hour. So
here we go. Well, so basically, the early days, my background, I actually did my apprenticeship when I was 15. I started at ARB. I was there for 2 years at ARB, St. Peter's. And the company actually went to receivership, I think, can't quite remember. And I ended up moving there like halfway through my second year apprenticeship in the mining industry up in Muswellbrook. Mm-hmm. So I was there, finished my apprenticeship, and we're doing like light vehicles for the mines. And I kind of went from there doing more like plant heavy. I did that for about 9.5 years, and at the time there was a bit of a downturn in the coaling industry, so they were making a lot of the mechanics redundant, and I've been there for quite some time. I knew the managers and the bosses really well, and I just kind of wanted to change. I've been out there for so long, And I had a few mates that had actually been with me out there, moved away to the northern beaches and near Sydney. I thought, look, I've never really lived near the beach. So, went to my mate's, slept on his couch, didn't even have a job, got made redundant. We just literally went driving around to workshops on the northern beaches and just anything I could get. I didn't care what the pay was. It's just like, I'm a mechanic. Obviously a bit of a pay cut I was going to take coming from the mining industry. And I got a job, didn't take long, and got straight into it. And I worked there for probably, I'd say 2.5 years. And the pay wasn't amazing, as you can imagine. Had to work Saturdays and all that stuff. So I guess the business started just doing after hours work, like a lot of guys probably do out there. I was just doing cashies on the side. At the time, I had a really good boss, and I kind of went to him with a pay. Could I get a pay rise? And obviously, he couldn't give me one, which was fine. He used to like a few beers, so I said, look, I'll give you a few cases of beer. Can I, after hours, can I use a hoist? I'll make sure it's clean and tidy. And he's like, yeah, that's fine, no worries. So this is kind of old school, but back then, this is probably 2016, 15. I was doing adverts on like marketplace things. It wasn't really marketplace, but it was like social pages, you have like your social pages, So I put up like after hours mechanic for cash. I literally wrote that. I can probably find it somewhere. And there's a picture of me like this in front of a car, and it blew up. Like my messages just went insane. There were a lot of Karens, and they said, you can't do work for cash, the ATO. Come on, man, I'm doing a couple $100 a week. Anyway, so it just blew up massively, and my inbox was getting flooded. So I was working round the clock. As soon as it was 5 till 9, 10 o'clock at night, every night. I was working on Sundays, get the keys off the boss. He was actually really good for that. But after a while, so he didn't actually own the building, someone else did, and they cottoned on, oh, what's this mechanic doing? I hear he's doing a bit of after hours work. And he goes, that's got to stop effective immediately. And for the first time, like I was getting some money saved together, and I paid off one of my car loans. I was like, yeah, I'm killing it, And he said, like, no, you got to stop doing this. So I was like, shit, what do? I can't go back to what I was doing, And so I looked around the area, and obviously the Northern Beaches isn't the cheapest place. And I found this this shed, and it was near this like there was a parts place. I used to have to go get parts where I was working, and I always used to work. And there's all these old boys. I used to sit around this, like it was a tiny one unit kind of thing. It was, I can't remember how many square meters it was, maybe 60, 70, I don't know. Had one hoist in it. They never worked on cars. They just sat there every afternoon. They were just drinking beers in it. and I always used to walk past there, and and it was an automotive shop at some point. I think the guy
became like a men's shed.
It was just a men's shed. Go there and drink beers. And there was a car on the hoist every now and then. And one day I seen a for lease sign on it, and I was like, oh, my ears pricked up. I was like, oh, I'm mad. So I went over there, and I said, oh, what do you want for it? He said, look, I want to get this much, blah, blah. And he go, oh, cool. And I kind of went, oh, it's pretty risky. If you never ran a business, like it's kind of pretty scary. So I kind of thought about it for a week, and I was like, yeah, bugger, I'm going to do it, So I stormed back up there, and he goes, man, unfortunately, I'm renting it out to this, builder for storage. And I was like, for sake, I missed it, It was the only thing I could find cheap enough, And then, and I thought, fuck this, But I just had this feeling, when the universe kind of brings you to something, you got to kind of go back to it. And then like 2 weeks later, the place had been trashed by this guy. Apparently he was like a drug addict, alcoholic.
Oh, wow.
He was sleeping in there. Anyway, the guy didn't know, so he ended up kicking him out. And he rang me back. He said, mate, you still want that place? And at the time, like, man, this is meant to be. I've got to do it, So I went back up there, and he had an old hoist. It was stuffed. It was stuffed beyond all measure. And he had some tools, and he said, mate, I got some equipment in here. Do you want any of it? And I said, mate, what do you want for it? And he's like, oh, I think I want 15 grand at the time. And I said, look, I can't afford 15. All my savings put together, I think I had about, at the time, I had 12. I remember I had 12 or 13 grand in my savings. I had nothing. I said, man, I can do you 6, and I'll pay your bond and everything, and it leaves me with just enough money to paint the floors and, get some equipment in there. So I told my boss at the time I'm going to quit, and it was only about half a K away from where I was working. So I literally pushed my toolbox out of the workshop and into my new thing, and I started. And in the first couple of days, like, this is great, like I was on the marketplace thing, on the social pages, and getting a couple of jobs. Within about a week, the work kind of just ran out. I was in a kind of a hidden complex. There's no work, and I was like, oh, okay, what am I going to do now? So I was marketing. There's only so much you can do, to get 8 hours worth of work a day. And at the time, I was like, well, if it doesn't pick up, worst case, I could live upstairs. I had like a mezzanine and stuff upstairs, so we could live up there. And at the time, we're living in a share house with my partner. And she was really good. She said, look, if it gets really tough and there's no work, we can always live in the workshop. So we had it set up so we could do that. And then basically, I was like buying smash cars on the side. Like I was just going to Marketplace or Gumtree, back then I would call it. And just basically fixing cars, in between jobs, I do a rego, and then bit by bit. But this is back in, I think, 2016 or 17, sorry. And Instagram wasn't as big as it was now. Neither was Facebook. And I just started doing heaps of photos on Instagram, Facebook videos, and just talking about what I was doing. And no one had really seen that before, you know, and I didn't know that. I was like, you know, surely, you know, everyone's doing this, but they weren't. And all of a sudden, it just started booming. And
it's not like it is now, right?
No,
like
now
everyone's
it's
filming everything. Yeah.
Yeah, now it's a complete different kettle of fish. You know what I mean? But yeah, so I just kept doing the filming, responding messages, and Facebook just blew up. And all of a sudden, yeah, it just went from this. We had to move the workshop from here to there. Like, I think we moved after about 9 months to another workshop. I got an apprentice on, we got a mechanic, and it just blew out of control. Yeah, so
That's epic, dude.
that's where we kind of ended up today. We got another store. We got one in Narrabeen, and then we were there for about 4 or 5 years, and we started one at the coast back in about 3 years ago.
It's been that long.
Yeah, it's been nearly 3 years.
Yeah, wow. One thing that's always struck me about you, and you know, we've run into each other a couple of times over the years and whatnot, but you know, I've always kind of watched what you're doing on social media. Do you have any kind of social media experience or any background in media, or you've always been a mechanic from the sound?
Always been a mechanic, yeah. So I got no idea.
Because one thing that you've done really well is the social media aspect of it. And I think what I really like, I mean, I work in marketing and social media for a living, right? So one thing I always really like about what you put out there is it's very authentic, but it's also really transparent. Like, you call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
Like you say it how it is.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that you've done really well is you've managed to create a couple of pretty viral videos. There's one of a particular GQ Patrol with a box trailer on the back.
Yeah.
Look, it's not directly related to your business, but it certainly had the effect of getting your name out there, didn't it?
It did. Like, I think when I started it, it was just about if I can make enough money to, you know, pay my rent where I was renting, I could pay for my 4-drive. That was what the business model was about. It was never about making money. It was never about being better than anyone. It was always wanted to learn off some of the best in the beginning, and still do to this day, you know. But it was, you know, what can we do with the money? How can we have fun with it? You know, it was all about the money I make. I put it back into the tooling equipment, the vehicles we're working on, and you've probably seen that GQ video. It was just about having fun. Like, the whole idea of the business.
Looks like
yeah. So like many years later, I was lucky enough to save up enough money to buy a farm. So we got a cheap farm just out of Denman, which is probably where a lot of guys have seen, you know, viral videos and things like that of us jumping cars and blowing stuff up and kind of having a lot of fun. And yeah, it was basically like the whole business model was designed to kind of obviously treat the customers, because you guys are the most important thing, obviously, like do the best work we can on your vehicles and everything like that, but to have fun. There's no investors in my business, you know. I think the only debt, like, I'll be transparent, I think we've got like a 50 grand business loan at the moment. It's like, that's it. There's no debt in the business. It's all, everything's paid up. Same as, I can clarify that, but all our accounts, everything we pay it monthly, the taxes, everything's up to date. So I believe that doing the right thing by all your suppliers, things like that, doing right by the customer. And you probably see me rant on videos about warranties and things like that. We take warranties really seriously. We don't throw people under the bus. Like, we're there to help. And it was just about having fun. And I think, you know, in the early days, because it was all about that, it wasn't about the money and how much can I screw someone out of getting something for their car. People could see that, and it's a bit harder, obviously, as we're growing. We've got managers, and I don't get to talk to every customer every day. But it just blew up. I couldn't believe it. Like, honestly, if you told me you would have done this 5 years ago, and my experience with social media is very limited. Like, a lot of people don't actually know this with me, but I went to a Steiner school for, I think, 2 years when I was younger. And then when I was talking about traveling across Australia, for about 2 years, we were doing homeschooling on and off.
Yeah, true.
And then, so I did that. And then when I went to Queensland, I wasn't the brightest spark, but I did 1 year of high school. Okay, 1 year of high school. So it was actually, I love iPhones and all the smartphones, because they, you know, I learned how to read and write with them. You know what I mean? A lot of people don't know that either. So, you know, a lot of people, back to the business side of it, when I said I was starting a business, they just started laughing. They're like, mate, you can't spell anything, you're this, you're that, you know, and so yeah, don't let that stop if you're going to start a business. There's people you can pay to help do all that stuff.
Yeah, and you're not becoming an English teacher. You know?
Correct, yeah, exactly.
And I think that's, you know, something that's been a big part of your success, as I said, as an outsider, is that it's truly authentic, and it seems to me like it's an enthusiast-run business, right? So people relate to that.
I think they do. They can kind of see it,
doing hood rat stuff in patrols, and they're like, I want to do that.
Yeah, for a 35-year-old bloke, probably should slow down a little bit, but
Never. Never. Don't get old. Don't fall into the trap of getting old, mate.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it happens too quick. But yeah, like I said, with the business, it's just been about doing what we can for the customer, having fun, just seeing where we can go with it. Like, we'd love to start a third store and things like that in the future, and keep pushing. get a good team. We've got a really good team behind us now. We've got to think about, I can't even remember off the top of my head. I think there's about 15 of us all together between the two stores. So we've got mechanics, managers, apprentices, got some good accountants. That's another thing too. Have a good accountant, guys. That helps a lot in business. Yeah. Because that's something I definitely can't do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a fun journey, I'll tell you what, to get to this point, and I'm really excited to kind of see where we go from here to what's next. So, yeah.
So that's sub 10 years, and you've gone from working for someone else and not being able to get a pay rise to now having, you know, 2 shops going, multiple employees.
Yeah.
And
It is, I won't say the most, it is stressful sometimes. In the early days of business, sometimes I do kind of think about that, you know, going back to me, an apprentice, a mechanic, you know, it's like, yeah, you work hard, don't get me wrong, you work real hard around the clock. And, but it's kind of, the stress is still there, but not when you've got a lot of a team. You know, it does change the dynamic quite a lot, and that's something you've got to learn as it goes. You know, you're going to get conflict in workshops, and guys don't get along with him, and things like that. It's all this whole new thing you've got to learn in business, and the bigger and bigger you get, you know, you're the HR, complex, you're this, you're that, you've got to do all of it. So it isn't as easy as I guess it was in the early days. It's a different kind of hard. Like, yeah, you might not be physically working 12, 15 hours a day on the tools all the time trying to get the jobs out, but then you're dealing with the other side of it. But
yeah, and I guess in some respects, you know, when you're doing the 12 to 15 hours on the tools working for someone else, at the end of the day, shut your toolbox and you go to the pub.
That's
or
it.
you
You can switch off. Yeah,
Whereas when you're the business owner, it never stops, right?
It never stops.
That's, you know, people look at successful businesses and their owners and go, oh, you know, they live such a good life. It's like, there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of pressure outside of what's immediately
massively
visible, right?
Saturdays, Sundays, you're going through accounts, you're checking this, you're doing that. You know, you're speaking to your accountant about BAS statements and this and that. It never really ends. You know what I mean? It's not an easy, and that's another thing too. A lot of people think, like especially family, friends, you know, because you know the business might be able to pay to build up a comp truck, or I buy a new ute every 5 years or things like that. They think, oh, that guy must be rolling in money. Like in business, it's not a straight line like this. It's down and then it's up and then it's down and it's up. You know, it's riding the waves, and you know, cash flow is a big thing in business. But it is hard. That's the only hard thing I will say about all these years of doing this is, you know, friends and family, they think you're a multi-millionaire. Yeah, you might be turning over multiple millions a year. Doesn't mean you're a millionaire.
Yeah, what's your profit margin?
Yeah, what's your profit margin, you know? So that's a tricky bit I've had to realise, you know, because like I came from nothing, you know, like my family, we never really had money. And I'm not saying I do now, but it's better than I was back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's been a bit tricky, but no, I wouldn't change it for the world though.
Yeah, and I mean, I've talked about this on this show with other people as well, and I think in Australia we have there's the tall poppy syndrome is alive and well, right?
Massive.
And like you go to the States and like they celebrate success and they build each other up.
They do. I have seen that culture's different.
They love supporting people who are having a crack and being successful. And I think in this country there's always like, oh, you know, he was giving it, or you know, there's this like, I don't know if it's out of jealousy or what it is, but I think in Australia we need to like support people who are having a crack and doing it for
and if someone is doing really, like what I try to do too, because I love like learning and listening. If I see someone that has a more successful business than me, and there's plenty out there, I try to like DM them, message them, see what's going on. Like, you know, there's, speaking of Luke from Drifter, you know, I've been talking to him for a while, and he's going to be coming over in the next few weeks, going to sit down and have a beer and have a chat, and he's been doing business for a very long time. Different field.
Amazing success story,
100%,
right?
and he's really relatable, but I want to like pick his brain and learn what he's got to say. Like everyone in the market, there's a lot of people you can learn of. I'm not going to go, oh, you know, they got this or that, and you know, people have been given things, and you know, even for me, there's like was gossip years ago, like going around, oh, Dave inherited all this money. That's how. It's good. I'm glad they think that, you know what I mean? But when they actually realise that I started with $12,000.
No, and that's what's so good about this, you know, being able to just share people's stories and for people to get a bit of an insight into.
Yeah, well, what I'm telling you at the moment, I think only probably my mechanics know this, my partner, not many people actually have ever heard the story. So.
Well, there's maybe a few thousand extra people now.
Yeah, they all know, probably judge me differently. But
mate, they'll judge you regardless. It's fine.
That's
but
it.
The beautiful part about YouTube is that they can say whatever they want in the comments, and then we can read it and enjoy that.
A bit of laugh at it, yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms of the business, you mentioned when you started with the I guess we'll call it the men's shed, and you had the old hoist and the tools that you'd wheeled down the road. You mentioned you were doing like regos and you were fixing up cars and flipping them and that sort of stuff.
Correct.
It's safe to say that the business has changed significantly since then, not only in terms of scale and size.
It has, yes,
but the
massively.
sort of work that you're doing now. So,
very different, yeah.
You know, you're a four-wheel drive specialist. You said about 95% of your business.
Correct.
But what's your day-to-day look like in terms of what's the shop's workload look like? What are they doing?
So like on any given day between the two stores, we're doing anything from, so just your cruiser coming in for a full service, wheel bearings, front end rebuild. You'll have a D-Max on the next hoist, getting a chassis brace, a clutch, things like that. You might have some 33-inch tyres in there, so we're doing a speedo corrector for it. Obviously, we're doing the wheel alignments and all the bigger 4-drives, 35s like on your 80, and there's a lot of tyre shops that want a bar of it, so wheel balancing up to 42-inch tyres. What else? We do SSM builds, second stage manufacturing, so we do a lot for Superior. We do the coil conversions, 76 cruisers, a lot of cruisers actually. Also Patrols, we do a lot of kits in those, like your 3 to 4s. We work alongside engineers, so some of the 4-inch kits we can get engineered. It's very vast what we do. It's not just, set thing. The only kind of things we don't do, I could probably be easy to say, at the moment we're not doing dyno tuning yet. It's something we may look into in the future. We need more space, so we may look at dyno tuning. But like other than dyno tuning and, full on fabricating, like, guys like, Benji Rant Customs and Kinsella, like they're fabricators, like that's their field, you know what I mean? We can, modify some rock sliders to sit with this, or, we'll repair chassis if they're cracked or damaged and things like that. But to come up and, build someone a set of rock sliders or an internal roll cage, no, that's not us, what I mean? But it's kind of basically everything else on the other side of that. A lot of auto electrical, we did that as well.
Oh yeah, true.
Because obviously 4 drives get a lot of water damage and things like that. So we do a lot of wiring, extensive wiring, more than most shops. Lockers, diff, reduction gears, that kind of stuff, yeah.
So what's the reason for doing the auto elec yourself rather than having like an auto elec you work alongside? Is it about quality? Is it about control? Is it about just more efficiency? What's the reasoning there?
The auto elec stuff, so we don't have an auto elec. If you're watching this, we're going to be looking at auto elec probably soon, so if we can get one, yeah. So at the moment, we do a bit of it, and not at a point where we could probably have an auto elec full time. So it's kind of, it's every few days.
Just to get stuff working, like lockers if you need to wire them in or something like that?
Correct. All that stuff easier, but even like, chasing harnesses, as 4 drives, the vibrations, mud, dirt, all the rest of it, they snap pins, so we can de-pin, that, we can resolder it, do it all properly, heat shrink, finding broken harnesses, especially in a lot of these 4-cylinder diesels, they vibrate so much, all the harnesses split apart. So, and the funny thing is, because a lot of these auto elects, you will send a car to, it's coming up with some, intermittent fault. They don't even find it They don't even find it anyway. And so like, we kind of just took it more on ourselves to kind of go, look, we've got this intermittent thing, let's go through, let's deep in the whole harness, do it ourselves. It was just actually easier to do it in-house and sending one of our good customers away to an auto elec. I'm not saying there's a lot of good auto elects out there, but just what we found in our areas.
Do you think that's like, because I've found a little bit of that with the 4-wheel drives as I go through like my journey with 4-wheel drives. You go to like a lot of sort of like, call them general mechanics, or even like you mentioned tyre shops, right? Like you go to like I'm not going to mention any, I nearly mentioned a name there, but I won't pick on anyone in particular.
Yeah.
But you go to like a regular tyre shop and say, oh, can you like install a set of tyres on some beadlocks for me? And they just go away.
100%,
Or what?
Yeah.
Do you think it's the same with like the auto elec stuff? Like 4-wheel drives are just that little bit more complex,
I think you're
or a
right,
bit more annoying to work on?
Especially, the mining industry helped me a lot with the mud and the damaged harness. It taught me a lot, so I can teach that to the boys. But I think it is, the muddy, dirty, 30-year-old cruiser comes in and they're just like, oh, I don't want to deal with this.
And everything's bigger, it's heavier.
Bigger, heavier, harder to get in the engine bay. It's covered in crud and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's a bit more of a turn-off, than it, maybe, I don't know. There's a lot of good auto elects out there, don't get me wrong, but just what we've found in our area.
And I'm not picking on auto electricians as a pursuit, but I just mean like just general mechanical stuff. And
like you're saying with the tyre shops, they just want to stay away from that,
I've gone through and my cars have become way more modified and obviously way more complex in terms of, engine conversions and 4 links and all that sort of stuff.
Mechanic,
if I took that car to a normal mechanic, I think they'd be like, get out of here, man. Like, even you go to a Repco and they're like, what's your rego? It's like, don't worry about that. It's not going to help you. And they can't get past that.
No, they can't. No.
And then you give them the rego and they go, oh, this is the part. It's like, no, it's not, because it doesn't have that engine in it anymore. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
So I think that's where, like, the 4-wheel drive specialist is so important for the industry, because you guys will know, like, I see stuff that you do about, like intake cleaning, for example.
Yeah, we do a lot of those.
You know what's going to happen to a certain vehicle based on your experience, right?
Yeah, definitely. It helps, and especially with fire and wiring issues, or things like 9 times out of 10, it's when it's that fault. It's good because we write things down. We have like notes and things like that, so it helps. And most of the vehicles we obviously get Range Rovers and everything outside of that, but it's kind of your big 3, or 4, whatever it is. Nissans, Mitsubishis, Toyotas, all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of easy to keep track of it as well. But yeah, it's definitely the industry. It is hard for a lot of these modified four-wheel drives. You're saying it's a very niche kind of thing. Who wants to work? And you got 35s on your car. No one wants to wheel on it. It's very rarely. You know, I don't want to balance it. You know, if you've got a vibration in the front end of a solid axle vehicle, that is like, I don't know, wheel balance.
Well, the last time I got a set of beadlocks balanced for that car was at your shop.
Oh, right,
for that exact reason.
So there you go.
No one wants to touch them, right?
Exactly, yeah. So it makes it a bit harder, you know, definitely. I'm not saying there's a lot of good shops out there that still do good work and things, and I think that's kind of where we picked up on a lot of things, because they were taking it to one guy to get this issue fixed. They just couldn't fix it, and they bring it to us, we can sort it out. So, and then they'll just come back to us for other things, which is really good. So,
yeah, and I suppose the longer you're in the business and the longer you're working on these cars, the greater your depth of knowledge becomes. So things become quicker to solve.
Definitely, they do, yeah. With chassis repairs that were really nasty, you know, might have taken us 2-3 days to fix now. Now we've got a lot of, like, you know, tools made up and techniques to kind of bring them back to where they were. And how do we get them straight? How do we get this? And, you know, what welders we're using and plating, so we can speed the process up, which obviously in turn makes it cheap for the customer as well. So it definitely helps seeing it day to day.
So you've been doing this for, let's say, 10 years, just to make it a nice round number, in terms of four-wheel drive. Have you seen a big shift in terms of, like, the level of modification that you're dealing with? Like, are you dealing with more heavily modified vehicles? I mean, you mentioned like coil conversions and that sort of stuff. That's obviously at the top end in terms of, you know, money and also complexity. But are you seeing like changes in terms of like trends of how vehicles are being modified?
Yeah, massive. I've never in 10 years, like, or even in the last 5 years, the amount of money and the obviously like the SSMs, we weren't talking about this 10 years ago.
No.
Like, very rarely, you know, be on a truck upgrade because it's got a high up on it, I don't know. But now it's definitely changing, that they're becoming way more modified. And obviously the laws are getting a lot more strict as well, whether we all know about that. But yeah, I think in the last 5-6 years, the modifications, I never seen anything like that, you know, back in the day. We remember what it was like, you know, if someone had 35s in their car, everyone's like, oh my gosh. And,
yeah, they were big.
Yeah, and everyone's doing like flip radius arms and remote red shocks in every second car, and you know, portals on Land Cruisers and reduction gears, and it was never like that. It's grown so massively, you know, especially America. You can see what the stuff they're doing over there. It's another level. We kind of follow them a couple of years, you know, away from them, but yeah, it's definitely what I was doing when I started, from, you know, basic mechanical repairs, this to what we're doing now. It's completely changed. Yeah. And the money people are spending on some of these cars is incredible. Like, I'm sure some of the builds you've seen, it blows my mind. Even I'm happy to build the jobs that someone comes and wants to drop, you know, 100 plus 150 on a Land Cruiser. You're like, man, that's awesome, but it's pretty full on. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've spent,
probably more in your truck, I'd say.
I've spent 150 plus on mine, but I've done that over like an 8-year period.
Yeah,
right?
You're not just dropping it off and picking up in, you know, a month or so.
No, and with mine, like, I've learnt as I've gone, so I've done a lot of things twice. And, you know, I've done something that I think is going to be good, and then it's turned out to be horrible, or it's had like a number of other knock-on effects that's made the car a pig to drive, and so then I've had to
rectify
undo
back
that.
Through back. Yeah.
So, you know, it's been a learning curve for me, but, you know, I think there's definitely a huge amount of money being spent on some of these cars. And when you talk SSM, so do you want to just explain that for anyone who doesn't know, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I'll do my best at it. So SSM, second stage manufacturer. So, you know, basically the company, whoever it is, you know, Superior, for example, they'll get a Land Cruiser or a, you know, 300 series Land Cruiser, whatever they're going to do. You know, they'll load them up, they'll do all the swerve testing, this testing. It's much more in-depth testing than goes in just like a normal engineering study, because obviously these vehicles have vehicle stability control. So, you know, they'll get a vehicle, do all the testing. It takes a bit of time, a lot of money on that one vehicle. And as long as that kit from the SSM kit that they've developed, we put that same kit into a brand new pre-registered car. So this car, remember guys, isn't registered. It's put into the vehicle. The VIN number on the vehicle stays the same, but the actual approval number. So every vehicle that comes in this country, obviously imports might be slightly different, but you have an approval number, you know, not as long as a VIN number. Now that's changed. Okay. So if you look up an approval number and a descriptor, you will see that, you know, the approval number that Toyota gave you will state what the vehicle is, the tyre size, all that kind of stuff. Whereas the approval number on the Superior kit, if you go through and find it, you will see, here it is. It'll be 4-inch 35s, coil convert, XYZ, you know, or you might have a slightly different approval number. This one's got 300 chassis extension, or this one's got 37s under that approval number. So it's not registered on the approval number as a Land Cruiser anymore. People don't realise that. It's not a Toyota Land Cruiser. Yes, it's a Land Cruiser, but...
Yeah, but it's not a Toyota anymore, right?
Correct, yeah. So on the Rover website or, the government website, that vehicle's approval number is no longer a Land Cruiser, and that is how it is registered as that, because the testing was done, the approval numbers are changed, and it has to have all the gear and requirements that one did the passing in that vehicle. It's a bit of a process. Obviously the vehicle has to be complete. We probably get around about, off the top of my head, 10 to 15 photos of the vehicle complete. So that's all the, the equipment put in it. And then that's submitted, and that's kept, I believe it's kept with the government as well. So they've got, so if you were to go change that and put massive tyres on it, they can always kind of go back to the files of what it's meant to have.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, it goes in a bit, and there's probably a few things that might be a little bit off on, so don't criticise every little bit of it, because it's obviously, it varies. But the beauty of SSM, and this is what we tell our customers, like, oh mate, I've got a Land Cruiser, or I've got, I'm getting a Hilux or whatever they're looking at. I'll get it in the car in 2 months, but I want to, pick it up from the dealership and drive it. SSMs are good for the life of the vehicle, and you could unregister it for 6 months, leave it. You could sell it to Tasmania. It's the same. It all applies down there. It's the same.
That's national.
It's national. So, if you do have a Patrol engineered on 35s, you sell it to a bloke in Queensland, he changes the registration. Guess what? You got to do the whole engineering process again. So, it makes the vehicle a lot more valuable to sell it, So if you do want to sell it, the market's bigger. Hey, I can sell you a lifted Land Cruiser on 37s.
A nationally legal car.
Someone in Queensland can buy it, deregister it, away they go. It's all good for the life of the vehicle. So it makes the vehicle a lot more valuable. So, but, I guess like you were speaking before on camera, doing this after rego, there are ways around things like that, but it just obviously gets a bit more tricky. And
so, I mean, and again, this is not legal advice, so...
Yes. Speak to your engineer in your area.
You do what you need to do with your engineer.
Yeah.
But the bit that's always been a little bit confusing to me, so if I buy a 79 series, probably not going to happen, but if I buy a 79 series tomorrow and I get it trucked to your shop before it's registered, you can put a coil conversion in it. You can run, 5-inch and 37s?
Yep, you can up to, yeah.
Is the max?
That's the max, yes. Yep.
And then register the vehicle and you're untouchable nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
But if I buy the same vehicle tomorrow and register it and drive it to your shop, can I still get a 5-inch and 37s?
No, and it's very unfortunate. We get phone calls like every day.
Yeah.
Hey man, I've just been waiting. I've got my car, and the dealership slapped the plates on it. That's it. As soon as the number plates go on that car, there's no returning from it. So,
yeah, right.
Yeah, so once the plates, can I just unregister it? No. Once it's registered and the approval number has been punched in the system, game over. There's no returning the vehicle to an SSM, unfortunately. And we get it every day. Like a lot of you guys out there call us and they've got a car, and sometimes the dealership does a cheeky on you and chucks reg on it to probably close off the end of month sale,
Yeah.
So be careful of that. If you got a Cruiser, make sure they don't register if you're on an SSM or Hilux or whatever that might be. But yeah, unfortunately, once the vehicle's registered, we can't even engineer that sort of a lift. People go, why not? It's in that car. And I understand it's very frustrating because it's like, well, how is it legal on that? It's the same car. Yes, it is the same car. But unfortunately, because it's been registered, we can't go back on that. We can't change the approval number, so we can't enter that. Now, an engineer won't be able to engineer a vehicle of that height. 5 inches, 37-inch tyres. It's just, look, you're probably going to, in the comments, probably going to say, well, my engineer will do 38s. Well, that's awesome. Get him to do it. But
send me his details.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, as a general rule of thumb, your 4-inch 35s or 315s, or a lot of engineers kind of have their limitations, and unfortunately that's where it is. And it's very annoying. Like I can see, I'm like, well, it's the same car, it's the same kit. Now, needless to say, with these kits, if you do have like a pre-17, depending on the year, pre-VCS, which is Vehicle Stability Control, there are kits we can offer. So like we've got a Cruiser, we've got two at the moment actually, but one's a 2012, the other one's a 2015 model. We're doing core conversions, 4-inch lift 35s, but because they're pre-VCS, we can, an engineer, we work with some good engineers, he's happy to get that whole kit, SSM kit, and put it onto that vehicle. Because it doesn't have VCS, it is possible. Okay. It just changes, and like I said, it's the engineers doing this, not us.
But still can't go to that maxed out 5.
You can't go to the maxed out 5, it's just too much. It's, possibly there is an engineer that would do it, but a lot of engineers just don't feel comfortable, and it's it's their license on the line at the end of the day.
Well, and it's becoming more and more strict, right, in terms of engineers getting questioned over why did you sign off on this particular vehicle. And
exactly.
And I think that's what people maybe don't understand. It's like the I don't know, the Wild West of 20 years ago.
Yes.
Like when, for example, my GQ Ute was engineered, you
Yeah.
look at that engineer certificate, and I've shown that
Completely
engineer
changed, yeah.
certificate to engineers today, and they're like, they just laugh. They're like, there's no way that would get passed now.
No.
But the mod plate's on the car. As long as it doesn't get changed,
That's it.
it's still
Leave it
legal.
alone. I think there's a Cruiser getting around. Oh, which one's that?
The Mickey Thompson one?
That's the one. It's on
Yeah.
42s or 43s or something crazy.
Yeah, the Arctic Trucks build.
That's
Mickey
right. Yeah,
Thompson
fully
bar
engineered.
thing.
Yeah. And it's
That's
getting around.
wild.
Yeah,
I
there's
had
no
a-
way you get that done.
I had a
now.
good chat to those boys at a show about 18 months ago, and I was like, how do you go driving this thing around? They're like, oh, it's fully engineered.
Yeah.
Like, we've been defected a few times because the cops don't believe us, but then we just get it cleared straight away because the
Yeah.
car's fully legal. And I'm
It was
like,
probably back in the early 2000s. That one.
yeah, and that's got like a chassis bob and like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's insane.
Crazy. Yeah.
But
yeah.
it's a different world now, and I suppose as we go forward, it's going to get more and more strict. And I suppose the takeaway message is really like we were talking about earlier. Talk to the engineer before you start doing it. If you want to get
Exactly.
your car engineered, you want it to be legal, it's worth talking to the engineer before you start, right?
Yeah, so speak to the engineer, like, and don't speak to one, speak to a couple, but speak to them before you go spending your money on any modifications. Because one engineer might want hydro boosters, one may want a double diaphragm, you know, one might want a specific type of braided brake line, one might want ceramic pads so you don't cook it on the brake testing, one wants this, one wants that. So, you know, and he might have done, you know, 2080 series the last couple of months. He's like, mate, this pad that I'm running is just working because obviously, you know, they push them hard on the swerve testing and stuff. So speak to your engineer. He will go, I can do this, I can do that. And you go, hey, what do you recommend? He'll probably want you to get the car looked at, make sure the bushes are good, everything's good in it. You know, it's in good roadworthy condition. He might give you some ideas on what brakes you should be running, what sway bars. He might even, because he's doing that many of them, depending who he is, might give you part numbers to a lot of it. So you can just go, that's my shopping list. You go buy the parts, we get them fitted up, and you know, because like I was saying to you off camera before, you know, with engineering, we've had a couple of patrols come through for an engineer, and they've passed magically. And another customer comes in, hey, I've seen you guys have been doing a bit of engineering stuff with this guy. Can you help me get my patrol up to scratch? And we're like, yeah. You need GQ, we need a GU diff, we need these brakes, those lines, you know, steering box, yada, 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 all that stuff. And the customer's like, yeah, perfect. So if I do all that, you know, we've been caught out on this. If I do all that, it'll be mint. Yeah, man, like the last two sailed through. And sure as hell, we do the whole build, we get the car sorted, and maybe it was a bad day, maybe the brakes weren't as good, who knows, and it just didn't pass.
And not all cars are the same, you know? Like
Exactly.
cars have
Maybe
just got
the
weird little
bias valve,
nuances, yeah.
proportionary valve in the back was a bit sticky. No one, picked that up or something like that, and the brake, wasn't 100%. But as a customer, they come back to us and say, well, mate, I've just spent, X, Y, Z dollars, and it hasn't passed. So now we don't get in between the engineer. You speak to the engineer and fit the parts, and then, kind of rest on him a bit more. Because I can, understand for a customer, I've just spent all this money. You said it had passed, and I've just spent, what, $1,500, or I don't know how much is for testing, and it failed. So yeah.
Yeah, well, having gone through the process, it's not cheap if you're going to do it properly and do the racetrack and the swerve test and the brake test and all of that. Like, $3 to $5 grand, easy to go through the whole process.
Yeah, it's a long day. It's money, Not only that, some of these vehicles, they get tested that hard. They cook the brakes on them. So, like, we've had a couple come back and they've purple and blue brakes, and they're just destroyed, after the testing, So, depending how they drive them.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something that I know is a very hot topic at the moment. There's a change.org petition going around about defect laws, and I hope it goes somewhere. Experience tells me that our politicians don't really care about change.org petitions, but that petition's around street cars and four-wheel drives, and saying the laws are too draconian, they need to be changed. And I looked at it a couple of days ago, and there's like 65,000 signatures on it, right? But
wow.
I think what we've got to remember, and I've grown up with street cars and then four-wheel drives, and I've been involved in drag racing and all that sort of stuff. We're still a niche community. Like, the vast majority of people don't care about being able to run 35s on a car. They'll buy a car from a Toyota dealership or a Mazda dealership, and they'll just drive it, and it'll be stock forever, right?
Yeah.
And I think for all of us who love modifying cars, I think we should be able to do it, but it's worth playing by the rules, right? Because otherwise, the hassles, like, man, I sold my last street car a long time ago because I kept getting defected in it. It was just too much of a headache, and I, thought I'd get into four-wheel drives and life would be easier, and
it's almost
definitely
harder.
Not. Yeah, it's harder,
definitely.
And I've spent heaps more money on four-wheel drives than street cars now, so, maybe
it.
that wasn't a good decision.
Well, even like behind us, so they've got a short-based patrol we imported from New Zealand, and It's got 35-inch tires and a 3-inch lift, and we're getting the process engine in that as well. So it's just getting to that point. And you look at that thing, it doesn't have a bar or winch on it. It's a plain Jane car, but as a business owner, we've got to basically be by the rules. And to say this, because there's probably going to be some guys out there saying, yes, I was pretty wild back in the early days. I will admit that.
Yeah.
In the comments, be like, I've seen Dave drive around 42-inch tires. Yeah, I have, if you want to, incriminate me. But
whatever.
Yeah, as I'm getting older, and especially the laws and things like that, we're making sure the vehicles we're driving on the road are...
Well, and particularly when you got your business on it. Like your branding's on it, right?
Exactly,
and it's your reputation. And you
yeah.
don't want... to, I guess, set a bad example for the young guys.
Exactly, yeah.
So can we talk about that little GU? Because it's
it's
pretty cool. I'll throw a photo up of it for anyone that's watching on YouTube, because it's quite unique. So that is a very stumpy GU Patrol.
It is, yeah.
Never released in Australia?
No, never released in Australia, so mainly a Japanese market. New Zealand got a few imports. As everyone knows, New Zealand got a lot of imports over the years. It was kind of most of their car market was imported, all of it.
Right.
Yeah. Always loved them, and I think a few years back we've seen a couple getting around. They were on GQ chassis, so they were getting like the bodies or GQ chassis. Anyway, but so I've seen a couple of them over the years, and I love them. It's so cool, Like I love a GQ shorty the best of times, and it was just out of curiosity. I started looking at the importing laws, because we're always looking at that stuff, and we found out that if a vehicle is 25 years old, you can import it because it comes on an old vehicle. And I'm like, get out of here. I looked it up, and it was a 99 model, but it has to be by the month. It can't just be years. It has to be adds up. Fun thing is like, Feb, 1999, and we're looking at the time, we're like, that's exactly 25 years old to the month. So I was like, no way. So we found one in New Zealand, and I'd never been in New Zealand, and I just put in the application. So we downloaded all the forms and stuff to apply for the approval, and we applied for it, and it took ages. The guy over there was really good. So I basically said, look, man, I'll give you like $1,000 deposit. Look, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull this off, but I'll pay you asking price.
Was this a private sale?
It was, yeah.
Right.
So a deal would have been a bit easier, but even then they'd probably, tell you to F off because, they want to make a sale. I said, look, I'll pay asking price. I'll give you a non-refundable. You can keep the $1,000, but it might take a week, 3, who knows like how long to get the approval through. About 2 weeks, back, forth. And it was just getting to a point, I was like, oh, it's such a headache. Anyway, a month went past, and they're like, you have approval. And I'm like, no way. We got approval on a shorty.
Yeah.
So I couldn't believe it. So I literally went to the money exchange and got some New Zealand cash, and we flew to New Zealand, and we drove it from Auckland all the way down the south, right to the South Island. Did a lot of driving in it, but it's just a little DI 3-litre auto. Yeah. All the shorties were either the RD28 3-litre, either manual auto, but it's no powerhouse. But I kind of like it the way it is. Everyone's like, oh, put a TD in it. I've got TDs here and there, so I'll probably just leave it the way it is.
It's just cool, man. It's something different, eh?
Yeah. But definitely, like, if a lot of people reach out to me and ask me, I'm happy to tell them how I did it. It's a bit of a long process, the customs, the GST import tax, there's a bit in it. So just be prepared for the money. I didn't realise I kind of budgeted for this much, and it was like this much to get it across the line.
Yeah, I experienced that looking years ago when I was involved in right into streetcars and Skylines. You look at like Skylines in Japan and go, oh, they're cheap. They're cheap until you land them in Australia and need to go through the compliance process and fumigation, and then...
And there's this, and there's another fee, and it's like, oh, that'd be another 500. We're like, what's that for? Oh, for the Joe to, scribble on the window. You're like, it's just another fee and another fee and another fee. So I kind of budgeted for, I can't exactly remember how much. It might have been 8, 10 grand, I can't remember, but it was quite a lot of money to get it across. There's a couple for sale in Australia. You've probably seen they're popping up for 45, 50, and there's good reason for that because they literally cost that much. I think I paid 25,000 New Zealand, which works out to about 24 at the time, Australian. But by the time I got it back here, and don't forget when you get it back here, you've got to apply for an approval through an engineer, like we're talking about engineers, so you got to get engineering, blue slip, all that kind of stuff, rego. So, you add all that up, I think the vehicle nearly owes us, close to, maybe 35, 40, I'm not quite sure. But
not a cheap exercise.
No, it's only 24 grand, that's cheap. And and it took about, I think, 4 or 5 months. It actually got shipped back to Japan on the Toyota ship and then back to Australia randomly, so yeah.
As you do. So does that mean that if that vehicle had been heavily modified in New Zealand, the process would have been far more difficult to get it?
That's another good question. Here? Yeah, so the vehicle, when you are importing most vehicles, they can't be modified. I'm not saying you have a snorkel on there or a 2-inch lift.
But nothing crazy.
No, if you had a big lift and hacked up guards and too much bar work even can knock it back. So they actually want photos of the vehicle that you're importing, and they want to look at it and go, yep, that's pretty much stock. So that with 35s on it now, I'll put that probably wouldn't come through.
Yeah,
you'd have to put it more back to stock. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting what you said about like the 25-year thing, because I know, you know, as I said, I was right into my Skylines and Jap imports and stuff, and I still look at them, but I can't ever afford a
Very
Skyline
expensive now. Holy dooly.
And the reason for that is when they became legal to grey import into America. You see the price of R34s just went to the moon.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It was
some of those...
like almost overnight, and it was
crazy.
overnight because as soon as the period of time had elapsed that they were then legal for grey import into America, Americans started buying them for 200 grand.
Yeah, was it the NER or the NER R34 NER? Man, the money in the 500,000. It's
yeah,
crazy.
Man.
Yeah.
Every now and then you see one pop up in the Jap auctions, and if it's a special one like a 34 NER or something like that, $500,000.
Oh yeah, I believe it easily, and they sell.
Crazy. Yeah, they sell, and then they go to America, and
that's it.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? What do you think the future looks like for four-wheel drives? I mean, obviously, people like you and I are still mucking around with 30-year-old shitboxes, let's call them, with GQs and 80s, and I can't help myself. I reckon that 90s was the golden era of cars, so that's where my heart lies.
Definitely, I can agree with that, yeah.
But what do you think the future of the four-wheel drive industry looks like? I mean, I know the 70 series platform is still super popular.
It's a very interesting question, yeah, especially being a business owner. You think about those things, you know, the life of the business and what you're doing, you know, like let's just go, for example, like someone that used to fit white goods appliances, that job doesn't really exist anymore now. You know, it's, you know, is that the market we're going down, especially with a lot of these Chinese electric cars? They'll probably have a, you know, like a 10-year lifespan with a government buyback where they just take them back off you and you get credits to get a new one because they're just garbage, they just recycle them or something. So it's a good question, you know, like, because there's a lot of industries that have kind of collapsed over the years. You know, will modifying four-wheel drives collapse in 20, 30 years? Possibly. Could it be the laws have changed so massively you can't modify cars? You know, are they going to be running like, you know, who knows, hydrogen, this, that, electric hybrids? Maybe they don't need brakes as often, they don't need this as often, you know. And people say cars are throwaway items, but things like suspension and ball joints, and let's just go back to the earlier cars, they're actually lasting quite a long time now. So a lot of these vehicles, ball joints, you'll see them do 300,000-400,000 kilometers. That's unheard of. Like an old 80s, 70s car couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So yes, it's kind of more of a disposable throwaway world we live in at an extent, but at the other side of it, there's a lot of components and metals and materials that come so far that these components aren't wearing out. So if you're not modifying things, the car will just drive and you'll just do basic maintenance. So I think a lot of the smaller workshops in the next 20 years, these vehicles are, you know, they've got brake regen, everything like that. They're not even wearing brakes out that often. You know, it's crazy. So it's definitely going to change. I think 25 years, it's going to be very interesting. I think the Cruiser and the tougher, there'll always be a spot for these, I think, for the next 30 years. You know, like our generation will buy a Cruiser now and they'll still be getting around. They're already, you know, 30-year-old truck. It's 35 years old, that one behind us now. So it's definitely, it's changing, you know, massively. And it's going to be interesting what's going to be left in 20, 30 years, what we can do, yeah.
Yeah, and what you were just saying about, like, you know, the service intervals and part life. I bought a new car for my missus 5 years ago from Toyota. Nothing crazy, not a four-wheel drive. And what spun me out was they said, oh yeah, the service interval's 15,000 Ks.
15, oh easy,
and I went,
yeah.
What? Because I've always had modified old cars, so it's 5,000 Ks religiously. And they're like, yeah, it's once a year, 15,000 Ks. Now, we've had that car for 5 years. We've done about 15,000 Ks a year in it.
Yeah.
And nothing has gone wrong with it.
Nothing.
We've done one set of tyres.
Yeah, just some wearable items.
We've done tyres.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we just did a set of brake pads in it. But like, that car has been so reliable.
And in probably 10 years, it'll be basically the same. The rock hub might be slightly leaking or it might need some spark plugs, you know, and this is the smaller garage, like in the olden days where, you know, cars are coming in to adjust the carby and adjust your points and, you know, it was leaking oil every freaking 400 kilometers, you know. Those days are done and, you know, obviously greasing items, nothing can even grease or service anymore. You know, it's getting pretty rare. So it's the smaller workshops that, you know, aren't specialists in something. I think you really need to specialize in something. You know, if you're a Merc specialist and you work on old Mercs, you'll probably always have work because it's a niche, or you know, you specialise in doing deleakers, you know, because no one wants to touch them. Nothing against the deleakers. But
I've got a few close personal friends that have got an unhealthy obsession with deleakers.
No, but you know, if you're a deleaker specialist, 100% you're probably going to get a lot of work because no one wants to work it. But I think in the new coming years, I should say, you're going to have to specialise in things. So if it is older, you specialise in that field and be super amazingly good at it, like better than anyone else. Or you're doing repair work on something, specific as well. Yet again, specializing in things. But I think if you're just a general like repair shop where you're just doing service work, time belts, things, that work is definitely kind of coming to an end at some point.
Yeah, and I suppose if the service interval is extending and the population isn't growing exponentially, then you're going to have less frequent jobs booked, right? Just
correct, yeah.
Because people don't need their cars serviced as often.
They don't need them serviced as often. And not only that, like every day we get cars towed into us, and you might have an engine, like a Range Rover, a 2006 Range Rover gets towed in, and it's got a snap time belt, so it needs an engine. That was a $120,000 car, whatever it might be, back in 06, 08. They're just like, yeah, I'm not fixing it. Literally, like all the time we got trucks coming, just taking cars to the scrap heap.
Really?
So people just go, I could spend 20, engine's going to cost me 15, 16, and then they go, you know what? How about we go hop down to the car yard, get some finance and buy a new car. It's only going to cost $120 a week. So it's changing. Like people aren't fixing things like they were before. The amount of like patrols that come to us and basically get towed out of there because they've got blown engines and no one wants to repair them.
3 litres.
Yeah, you probably see them all over the marketplace, you know what I mean? But it's definitely, it's a weird industry. I don't know where it's going to be in 15, 20 years, yeah.
All right, so we've just had the pool guy arrive, so we're back. We've got to keep the pool clean.
That's it.
Now, just to keep talking about this for a second, because it's something I'm really interested in, particularly when we talk about four-wheel drive. So not from a service perspective, but from a new car development perspective. Like, obviously the 70 Series Land Cruiser, Toyota will just keep flogging that platform for as long as people will buy it. It's now a 4-cylinder.
Yes.
Have you seen any change in terms of, do you think they're less desirable now that they're a 4-cylinder?
That's a really good question. The debate of the 70 Series Land Cruisers, wow. Yeah, so very interesting you asked that. So the 2.8's out now. I've driven the manual. Yeah, have I driven the manual? Yeah, I've driven the manual, driven the auto, because they're out now. They go great. They actually go really well. And it means, they're crappy. They actually go really well. But here's the kicker. Like, we haven't done an SSM on a 4-cylinder yet. There's still a lot of V8s out there, obviously, maybe in 2-3 years, and this from now might be a very different story because that's all that's left. But people are definitely hanging on to those V8s.
Yeah.
I don't know how many we do a year, 20, 30, 40 SSMs. I'm not quite sure. The Cruisers, I can't even keep count of how many we do, but I think we quoted 2 on a 4-cylinder, and no, it's definitely like a real Aussie V8 thing.
Yeah.
It's really stuck with the Cruiser, hasn't it? So it's an interesting question. But yeah, we're doing repairs, I'm thinking, but the big builds, I haven't seen any really this year or like late last year, so that's quite interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe it's one of those things like, Australia is so synonymous with V8s, right? Like there's always been that V8 thing that we're obsessed with and they sound cool and they use
100%.
heaps of fuel and we love that. But it's interesting for me to see, like with the 300 series, right? Going from a V8 200 to then a 6-cylinder 300, and there was so much chatter on the internet like, they've ruined it, they're not going to sell any, they're not going to make power, they're going to be unreliable. And like, fast forward a couple of years, there's some 300s making mega power.
Yeah, I've seen some of the stuff Just Auto's been doing with them and stuff like that. Yeah, it's incredible, yeah.
Yeah, like 400 horsepower out of them without even opening them, not really putting any bolts on.
And they do it so smoothly and amazingly, it's just incredible. Yeah, the technology with these smaller engines is just crazy. Yeah. We're going to see a lot more of it too, I think, in the next few years. Yeah,
and like the efficiency in terms of how those engines make power, and obviously the electronics have come such a long way. But I guess the interesting point for me is, what's the reliability going to be like, right? So like a 79 is pretty universally understood to be a detuned motor from factory, right? Like they're
very detuned. You can pull big numbers, and that's the thing too. Like, let's talk about fuel, emissions, fuel consumption, things like that. Now, obviously, diesels, petrols, especially as well. The fuel systems where they were 15 years ago to now, the way they can pressurize and atomize, it's incredible what they can do now, and the timing and when they can change it and the values. It's amazing. But what we're seeing, especially the stuff we're doing, like your Rangers, your 2-litre Amaroks, all these highly strung engines, good on fuel, but they're tapped. I don't know if they're running at 98% or 90% of their capacity just to keep that. You got a 2-litre freaking bi-turbo and a Amarok or whatever it is, and it's pulling a big weight, and it's on song. It's moving. It'd be like having a V8. Pumping at full throttle, and it's not going to last as long. So we do see a lot of engines in Rangers and Amaroks and Tritons. The Tritons are pretty good, but they're really highly strung motors, and so it's not a great thing. And it's kind of back to that disposable era, maybe. we get Rangers that aren't even that old brought into us, and people say, oh, we can't fix that. But what do you mean? It's only 10 years old. PX1 Ranger, no, not fixing it.
Yeah.
I'll just scrap it. Honestly, I'm not spending 10, 15 grand on an engine for it. So yeah, it's the days of the old TD and the 1HZ, and yeah, they were slow old things, but man, I don't think we're going to see that lifespan. Maybe let's see how the 300 series goes. Being a Toyota, it's probably a lot better. But
like a 1,000,000 kilometre 1HZ that's been around Australia.
I don't know. I got what is it? What have we got at the moment? 1HZ FTE. We've got one at the moment, and it's got 980,000 Ks original engine on it, and it's fine. You look at it's an incredible engine. And actually, I was going to take a photo of it. The timing belt gear and the cam gear. I've never seen this in all my years, like with that many Ks. I've seen a few of that many Ks, but we didn't pull that apart on it. It was like a mirror. I'll have to take a photo of it. Like, it's just because it's done that many kilometers, and it's just polished like a mirror. So, I don't know. Will we see 1,000,000 Ks out of the 300 series?
Only one way to find out, right?
Well, yeah, we'll have to give it a few years.
It gives me great confidence that you just said that about the FTE, because a few years ago now, I spent a considerable sum of money on an FTE conversion for my 80 series. And
God's motor, you reckon? Yeah,
well, I got lucky because the one that I put in my car only had 5,000 Ks on it.
Oh, wow.
So it was basically a brand new engine.
Yeah.
I really, really hope that
you'll get 1,000,000 Ks. I reckon you will.
Well, you know what? Like, I'd be happy with 500.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really interesting, and I guess what you say about people with PX1 Rangers or the Range Rover that's 10 years old and they don't want to put a new engine in it. I'm not seeing new vehicles that are gonna. Well, who knows what's gonna happen in 20 years? But like, they don't seem to have the same character, and they're not building the same cult following that like a GQ or an 80 series or a 60 series.
Exactly,
or even like the old Defenders, right? People are still spending dumb money on.
Oh yeah, we get a lot of old Defenders
and
Range
Rover classics and that.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, like, nowadays, if any of the cars that we're seeing will have that same like cult following, and if they'll last.
Well, if they'll last, like when we have kids and they see a 300 series, when they turn, 25, 26, they'll or even younger, do they want that car? Is it going to be any good?
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe it's clapped out. It's no good, and it's it's still an IFS. And these things are going to be getting old. I mean, can you imagine these will be in their 50s and 60s when my kids in their 20s?
Vintage car.
Yeah, vintage. So it'll be very interesting. I think a lot of things are going to change, and I don't know what the laws are going to do when it comes to fuel consumption and things like that.
Can you use diesel?
Can you? You might have to have buy coupons to do like in New Zealand with diesels. You got to buy. That's a long story of that, but you got to pay for kilometres you do on a diesel. You know, so that it might get to that. If you've got a classic car, you can only drive it on this day. Who knows? It's going to be interesting.
I think it was last year California signed off a piece of legislation that said no more diesel vehicles after 2030.
I believe it.
You won't be able to buy one.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not like we're talking 20, 30, 40 years.
No, we're
in
talking
the future.
really
we're talking
close.
Like in the next few years, things are going to start to get real, and maybe these cars are going to just end up being bush toys, which I'm also kind of cool with.
That's a trailer truck. This Rego here, guys, you can look it up. It's I think it's been out of Rego for 3 years, so just ignore this.
For display purposes only.
Yeah, 40s are not legal. So
let's have a quick chat about this thing. So this has been quietly sitting in the background.
The old GQ.
I love it. Has that got a back window in it at the moment?
It does, yeah. It's got a back with Perspex.
I was going to say, because I need one. And Nissan's discontinued the back window for a
Really?
single
I didn't
cab
know
GQ.
that. Oh, wow. Hard find.
I had a windscreen guy come out last week to replace the window in the back of the ute. And he brought an MQ back window. Oh. And it's 70mm too long. And I said, that is the wrong window. And we've been going backwards and forwards with them. And they're like, no, they're the same.
Anyone out there with a back window?
If you've got a back window for a GQ single cab, please hit me up.
What'd you do to it? It's broke.
Oh, my God. You'll see it on an upcoming episode of 4-Wheel Drive 24/7. But unfortunately, I wasn't doing anything cool at the time. It was a transit stage.
Oh, no.
We were on the Jeep track down in Tasmania. And I was just cruising. It was like not even a challenge. We were just driving up a hill. And drove over a branch, the front tyre picked it up, threw it into the headboard. It hit the headboard, bounced back, dented the back of the cab and smashed my back window. Which is just great. And I went, no worries, I'll just throw another window in it. But no, Nissan have discontinued them.
Wow, okay.
So
long live the GQ ute then, I guess.
I'm about to put a Lexan back window in it.
Yeah.
So anyway, enough of my problems. Let's talk about this one. So this is a factory single cab, not a chop.
It's the chassis a wagon, I think. It's a factory wagon chassis. It's the ute cabs off something else. It's got roll cage, internal, external, like the brush stuff. What else? It's pretty basic, really. It had a TD in it. I sold the TD. I actually put an LS in it, but then I pulled it out, and then I put a TD back in it. It's my ADHD anyway. So it's got a TD, probably running about 300 horsepower now. I just love TDs. Yeah, they're not as good. I know them really well, so it's kind of always good to build them because we get a lot of customers with TDs. So it's good to show them what we've done to this one. But yeah, it's pretty basic. 85s. I think it's got MPC clutch. It's got reduction gears, 4/6 gears, RCVs. Yeah, what has it got? The giggle pin top hat mount winch. That's the widened drum from the high mount guy. So if you're after winches, the high mount guy's the guy to see.
So that's an 8274 with a giggle pin top hat on it.
Correct, yeah, and just widened drum and brace.
And for anyone that's not into high mounts, you'll probably think we're speaking Dutch, but like...
Yeah, air spool has must as well.
For all the high mount geeks, then you'll appreciate all this. So this is a winch truck. Have you raced it?
I've only done years ago. I can't remember. It was so long ago. We did some basic short course stuff. I can't remember when. This is many years. I had that truck for about 6-7 years ago. The previous owner had it. It's done cliffhanger, I think, 3 times. I'm still actually a good friend, not friends with him, but I know of him. I'm friends with him on Facebook, so we talk about his truck. But yeah, this is one of my vehicles I've had for many years. It had no engine. It was sitting at the farm, just no engine, nothing in it for years. And I just thought, let's get it back on the road. And got to update the roll cage, and yeah, cliffhanger would be good. Now that we're getting to a point with the business, finally got people who can help me run it. It's been many years, so we can get some time off to go do things like that. So kind of at that point in my life now where I actually can go to events. I've been invited to cliffhanger like years and years. I just couldn't. I was on the tools, in the office, on the tools. I couldn't get away. So now, hopefully, I can jump away for a week or two. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, cliffhanger this year is apparently the last time they're going to run it.
Oh, well, that might be the
thing to
be.
So,
So
I'll be
definitely
out there,
pushing
so I'd
there.
love to see it, man.
Yeah.
It's a very cool thing, and it's like there's no surprise when you look at the winch truck racing scene that it's like 95% GQ Patrols, right?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, that is true. It's very rare to see the Land Cruisers running GQ running gear, GU running gear, but yeah, they are very common in the winch truck scene. Very common, yeah.
Just so tough, right?
Yeah.
Just absolutely bulletproof driveline.
Well, especially GQs. A lot of people don't know that the GQs and GUs, so the reason you see mainly GQs is the chassis inner wall is thicker on a GQ. So,
is it?
Yeah, so you've got, the chassis C channel and the boxed in part here. If I'm correct, the GUs have, it's like I think it's 2 mil. I think it's 2 or just on a 2 mil inside wall, and then the GQs run the same all around, so it's 3. So you probably see on GUs, they always tear the coil towers off the rear chassis. It's because they're welded to that lighter chassis, so they're more susceptible to bending. I don't know if they did it for ADR compliance and crashing because they got more crumple zones in a GU.
Yeah, because
whereas these things like battering rams, so that's why you see GQs. The chassis are mainly used. So just the thicker, the heavier, the stronger.
So GQ chassis, GU diffs, GU steering box.
Correct.
Which is what I'm running in my ute.
Yeah, exactly. That's where you want to be.
I've beaten on that car pretty
massively,
hard.
Just loves it. You can't beat a good old GQ ute. They're getting hard to find now, man.
I talk about it with Sean frequently because I've done quite a few trips with him now, and obviously he's a Land Cruiser guy and loves his 80s, and so do I. But there's a reason that I built a GQ ute for doing that harder stuff. Because if I drove my 80 the way I drove my ute, it would break everything.
Yes.
And my 80's tough, right? Like it's 35s, twin locked reductions. It's a capable car, but you just can't. Well, in my experience anyway, you just can't shock load the driveline like you can in a Patrol.
Well, yeah, the Nissan gearboxes, the manuals especially, they're a strong box. For something that has, no upgrades in it, you can beat them, and the clutches are big, so you upgrade your clutch, depending on what drive, engine you're running and stuff like that. But those boxes, I've run them behind, pretty powerful LSs over the years, and you're seeing behind Cummins and stuff like that, they can put up with it for a bit as well until they get to go off the moon. But just for a baseline thing, entry-level truck, the diffs are massive. You've seen the size when compared to Land Cruisers.
Yeah, like those GU diffs are just so staunch, right? Like everything's just big and heavy. And,
well over-engineered for what, the car came out in some little, 31-inch tyres and tiny little thing. And the diffs in them are huge, the gearbox is good, but they're getting rarer to get now, the good ones, so that's for sure.
I wonder if Nissan had any idea what they were creating with the GQ Patrol.
I don't think they had any idea, So they had some leftover parts from something and continued it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole story of the TD, what was it, United?
It was a forklift motor, wasn't it?
Yeah, United Diesel, because I think Nissan, I could be wrong, so don't roast me on this, but United Diesel bought So they bought into Nissan, and then they had these 4.2s that were developed by UD or whatever it was, and then they're a commercial engine in buses and this, and they're like, there was that transition for MQ Patrol, and they were looking to do the GQ, and they put the 4.2 in it, and it was just like the early silver tops have the heavier rods and all that kind of stuff, and the later ones they lighten them up a bit to kind of get them to rev a bit. So they're just well over engineered for this vehicle, because it's a truck engine,
Yeah, well, that's what my ute is, like an early model silver top, and it is a tractor. It's slow.
They're getting a bit of a bad rap now, the poor old TDs. I think it's because the technology we're seeing now out of, especially like the engine you've got in your 80 series, you can't really compete with that. But we're all like, even this thing here, it's a factory turbo motor, but we're pushing that on the boundaries. I think it was leaning on over 40 pounds of boost. We're kind of bringing it back, but it's, people go, oh, they're crap. They just snap cranks, they're kettles, and this thing doesn't overheat because I've got like rear-mounted radiators and things like that. It never gets hot, so it's a lot to do with cooling system too. But a lot of the poor old TDs really.
Man. And I think what people forget as well is like they're old. Like they're a 30-year-old motor that's probably been owned by a few P-platers, has probably been overheated multiple times
on the beach,
been beaten, and maybe hasn't been serviced as well, or it's running 40 pound of boost or 25 pound of boost. And like you look at, the average, I'm going to probably get upset a few people here, but the average P-plater GQ, right? Like 25 pound of boost, the fuel screw's wound to the moon.
Yeah, just wind it straight in,
yes, they do break, but like you do that to any motor and it's gonna hurt it, right?
Massively,
the fact that these things can just take it, it's quite phenomenal.
Yeah, for what were they packing out, 80, 90 horsepower, if that, I think, back in the day.
I'm pretty sure my ute's still making like 80 horsepower.
Yeah, that's all you need, mate. It's
very slow, well, reductions in 4.6s, baby.
That's it.
So, this thing's pretty good?
It's nearly done. Just got a bit more wiring to do in it yet. I did drive it for many years. Did a lot with this thing. I've done 6-stage a few times in it in the harder tracks and been down south, up everywhere with it. But it's going to be back on the road. It's driving and running, so to finish it off. And hopefully, like you said, we'll do Cliffy.
Yeah, sick.
Get that done. We're doing some other stuff for the Series 4 Patrol with Benji. So we started with the LS on that, and it's turned into a full-blown rock crawler. It's a dream I do tough trucks one day. So we're getting that one ready for tough trucks. So between the two of them, bit of rock crawling stuff with the buggy boys,
sick,
and the winch stuff.
And so that's going to stay as a wagon.
It is, to everyone's despair, I guess. I really, it was easy to cut it in half and bob the rear of it, because we've already actually bobbed the rear chassis and brought it all in, and it'd be much easier just to cut it in half and make the rear end and put the coilovers up. But it was that whole thing, it's got to be the wagon. It's got to look like, Mum's just a Patrol on 42s and just be completely backwards, It probably makes it a little bit less capable, actually, but we wanted to keep that wagon.
The ludicrous factor is part of the fun, right?
It is, like you go, the older boys probably remember at tough trucks, like the fridge and those old 80 series of big block Chevs in them, and running gas and just loud and obnoxious 44 boggers and just rolling down the hill, and everyone's like, I think, I love full body trucks for that kind of rock crawling scene.
Yeah, very cool. Well, mate, I really appreciate your time. It's been a really good chat. I've learned some stuff. So if anyone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to hit up Blue Flame?
Just, go on Google, look us up on our website. We've got 2 stores, and give us a call, shoot us an email if there's anything we can help you with.
Beautiful. All right,
easy, man.
Thanks again, man.
Yeah,
appreciate it. And we will see all of you next time on the outer side.